Welcome to the Iowa Ideas Conference and this morning's session, Keeping Construction, which is within our economic development track. I'm Tom Barton, the Gazette's Deputy Bureau Chief, covering Iowa politics, including the Iowa legislature and campaigns. I'll be serving as your moderator, helping to guide today's discussion and conversation, again, as part of Iowa Ideas, which seeks to explore the issues, address challenges, and share the big ideas that will shape the future of Iowa. I'd like to recognize our presenting sponsor, ITC Midwest, which helped make this virtual conference possible. Thank you to ITC Midwest. A reminder to audience members, you can submit questions to our panelists in the chat box, and we'll do our best to incorporate those throughout this discussion. As I mentioned, today's session is entitled Keeping Construction. Forward motion for development projects can be challenged with supply chain and workforce issues and construction costs. What are developers doing to create workarounds? What are they doing to recruit or find people to do the work? We'll explore that and more during the hour. With me today are Steve Emerson, president of Aspect Architecture and Design in Cedar Rapids, and a local developer who's fueled the redevelopment of many downtown Cedar Rapids properties. Welcome, Steve. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We also have Chad Pelley, a licensed civil engineer who oversees development operations at 2040 Building Concepts. Chad has designed and implemented numerous development and infrastructure projects, including industrial, commercial, and residential developments. Welcome, Chad, and thank you for participating in this discussion. Next, we have Kelly Edmonds, president of Merit Construction, an employee-owned company and general contractor with a 140-year history in Iowa. Welcome, Kelly, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
The latest economic forecast shows challenging times ahead for construction, with rising interest rates, inflation, labor shortages, and recession risks on the horizon. The limited availability of various building products due to lack of manufacturing capacity to keep up with demand has also contributed to rising construction material costs and delayed deliveries to contractors. Steve, as a developer, I was hoping that you could help set the scene for us. What was the development landscape like in Iowa in 2019 prior to the pandemic? What projects were you working on, and how has that portfolio changed?
2019, we're really quite busy. Doing most of our work is downtown, so doing a lot of office work, tenant build-outs, expanding tenants, frankly, buying empty office buildings, trying to re-tenant them, finding people to go in there. We're just as busy now, but just not doing office stuff. We're more busy trying to figure out what we're going to do, frankly. A lot of office space. If I do everything downtown, if there's an empty office building, I'm trying to look to convert it to housing if I can, because frankly, not a lot of companies are looking for office space. I've had several tenants that tried forcing their employees to come back to work, come downtown, and the employees just said, no, I'm just going to go work somewhere else. So instead, the tenants come back to me and say, hey, we don't need 30,000 feet anymore. We need 10. So we're going to amend our lease and give you back some space. And so it's more of a front of who we're chasing at this point and what we can make happen due to the pandemic.
So I guess who or what projects are you chasing?
Right now, we're converting several office buildings to apartments. The Jimmy John's or the Iowa building is becoming apartments. We just did the Skogman building. I bought the Guarantee block, and both the old Dragon building and the Guarantee building are going to become apartments. Even the Principal building, Principal moved, shifted over downtown and over in Hiawatha. That building's empty, and we're looking to see if that can be converted to apartments, because frankly, it's office space that not many people are looking for. There's only been a couple office tenants looking downtown lately.
What are the status of those projects?
Iowa building's underway. Construction will be wrapped up spring of next year. Skogman just got done, and that leased up about a month and a half. It was amazing. Everybody wants to move into these apartments. And Principal, we're just designing right now and looking to see if we can chase after historic tax credits, or if we can't on that one. We got to make sure it's considered historic and contributing.
Understood. Um, Kelly and Chad, I'll throw the same question to you. What did business look like for you pre-pandemic, and what does it look like today? Kelly, let's start with you.
I think the biggest thing that we've noticed is that the spectrum of projects has shrank. We were really we were doing a lot more diverse projects before the pandemic, and when I say diverse, they're not unusual, but just schools, healthcare, religious facilities, senior care. It was a smattering of everything. And post pandemic, we see that focus shrunk down to more specific sectors. So most notably warehouses. We've put in place several million square feet of warehouses in the last few years. Obviously, a result of the supply chain issues and the logistics that have changed since the pandemic and those shortages. And then kind of tagging on to what Steve said, we're doing a lot more multifamily now than we have in the past. So trying to keep up with that demand for non homeowner housing.
And Chad, what about you? Similar? What's your business looking like?
It's very similar. Pre-pandemic, we were going as fast as we could to get city disposition on properties for mixed use and you name it. Very aggressive with development. And quite frankly, now you're lacking in people, materials, money. You can imagine. So we do a lot of development, which takes many years to get the infrastructure and some of those things in. So right now, we're kind of focused on single family homes, a few multifamily. We've got quite a few projects just kind of teed up, if you will, getting entitlements, going after tax credits, and just sitting on a shelf, waiting for more favorable conditions. Because the interest rates right now, especially upwards of 7%, don't work with any pro forma for us.
Well, so I guess that gets to my next question. Steve, how are interest rates impacting new and existing projects? I guess, how has the increased cost of borrowing, I guess, impacted project financing for, I guess, for your operations?
Yeah, those are two very different scenarios. Existing, you can't do anything about it. The bank sends you a letter. I got one on my desk right now saying, "Hey, we adjusted your rate up. It's moving up because the market's moving up, and I already own the building. I already have the tenants, and I can't do anything about it except make less money." And so the projects that are skinny already are possibly losing money or breaking even. The hope is just that it comes around and they come back down again. For new projects, it's a determining factor whether they go or not. If you can't find other layers of credits, tax credits, grants, assistance, whether it's federal, state, or local, a lot of these projects just aren't viable right now. Chad and I have talked about this on some projects. If we can get a project to go as skinny as possible, like just breaking even at this point, the hope is try creating a project that is barely breaking even, and in hopes is in 3 years rates come down, you refinance it, and then now all of a sudden it makes sense you're making money just to keep our people busy. But like he said, there's projects that are teed up ready to go, but you just can't afford to build them right now.
And can you give some examples of some projects that you've got teed up, ready to go, but are having, I guess, problems with it? Go ahead.
I can give you a great example. We had a multifamily apartment designed for Center Point, right next to assisted living we just built. We bid it out, and the bids came in, and we clawed at that, tried figuring it out. We could not get a pro forma to work. The market rates there just wouldn't support it, and we could have built it, but continually lose money. The derecho housing replacement grant from the state came out. It's federally supported, and we applied for it, and we got a grant to build that building to build multifamily housing to replace the housing that was lost during derecho. We were able to build it because of that. We just started that project, but that thing's been designed for 3 years now, and with the cost of construction and just because of pandemic, it wasn't the interest rate then, it was construction costs. We couldn't afford to build it. With that grant now we can, and they adjusted how that grant works. It used to be housing replacement grants. It was just a reimbursement. Project gets done, they give you money. Now this one, they're allowing us to bill it as we go. So that's great. So we don't have to get a bridge loan from the bank at 7.5%. We can build them as we go. So the state's really helped in that regard. That created a project.
Yeah. So you've mentioned, and I think you also talked about this in our previous discussion, preparing for the session, that developers are having to leverage and layer tax credits and grants to make projects more cost effective. I guess, how has higher inflation affected tax incentives? And you mentioned some of them, renewable energy tax credits, historic tax credits, et cetera.
Well, the main layering of tax credits is just to try to get the cost of construction down and that end loan down. The Iowa building that I mentioned that we're converting to apartments right now has state historic tax credits, federal historic tax credits, brownfields credits, a TIF from the city, as well as workforce housing credits. All of those credits come back after the fact and pay down that debt. So the higher construction costs, the longer time to build the projects, and then everything just adds to it. So we have to use those tax credits to pay down that end debt. So you might be looking at a 50 or 60% loan to value on your debt to make this thing work, rather than 80% what it used to be.
Okay. We've got a question from the audience. I think maybe this is directed at Steve, but I'll throw it to the group. Can you tell us about initiatives in your developments aimed at promoting equitable access to housing?
Most of these programs, like that derecho replacement, has a requirement: 51% has to be 80% mean, rent rates, and qualifications. Now, frankly, in Cedar Rapids, the 80% mean rent rates are not much different than market rate, but the qualifying side of that is important, so that way they're available. And we as developers reduce that rate even lower than that, just to make it so people want to go after or live in those units. So most of these housing incentives have some sort of an affordability requirement. Workforce housing doesn't have that requirement. However, their goal in that grant is get our costs down so that we can provide units at a lower rent rate and still make the pro forma work. So effectively, it's doing the same thing. It's just not a rigid requirement, but it's to our benefit to lease up our units. So we'd like to keep the rate down also.
Kelly and Chad, anything to add to that?
I mean, some of the programs like the derecho recovery require certain marketing to minority groups, et cetera. In our neighborhoods, that's one thing we're constantly trying to do, is provide amenity-rich neighborhoods in all price points, both rental and owner-occupied. And quite frankly, that's a challenge. Today, with the pricing, as Steve mentioned, the lack of materials, time is money, and these projects are dragging out. That's the biggest problem. It's tough to do. You got to get creative. I'm hiring dishwashers with a work ethic and turning them into trim carpenters. Became my own cabinet dealer to cut that markup cost. It's frustrating. The most frustrating thing, I call it the COVID excuse. I wonder how much fat's being ladled out there just because it can be, right? And then you start looking at earnings, which I don't recommend you do. And you look at like Weyerhaeuser, for example, and see that in 2022 they broke records for profits. And you start looking at that, and it's parasitic, and it's painful to think that that's how humanity is fractured at this point. But you do what you can do. And I think that's the challenge. Smaller homes. We're squeezing inches out of houses, just to try to get everything we can smack dab into there. People will look at what payment they can afford, right? And work it backwards. We were spoiled. 3% rates let you buy twice the home. It's back to when I bought my first home. It's at the same interest rate we're at today. So people are adjusting. I think it's going to take a minute because we're spoiled. And like anything else, eventually you got to move, right? It's not just relocations and divorces. People will move. A lot of people are locked in at low interest rates. So we'll see how it goes.
Kelly, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree with everything those guys just said. From a contractor side of things, we are just seeing developers get a lot more creative. Using, Steve mentioned the derecho funds, workforce housing credits, low-income housing tax credits. We're seeing a lot more of that, and developers, I guess, utilizing or trying to utilize those a lot more than in the past.
Okay. Just a reminder for those who are joining us, questions are encouraged. Please send us your questions. You can submit those in the Q&A area of the Whova portal. I'm curious, in what ways has the Inflation Reduction Act energy incentives and tax incentives created opportunities for real estate and construction industries, or has it? And if not, what's impeding that?
I'll say that I haven't seen a direct link. If there is one, it is not noticeable in the contractor industry. or the contractor side of things.
The only one that I can think that's associated with that is the geothermal tax credit that did get increased. I'm doing some geothermal projects downtown, which are kind of creative. It's weird, but that's a 60% rebate of a tax credit. I don't know of any others that have affected me and that doesn't really affect me. That just gives me a little better system, more efficient system, I think, for the same cost of what a conventional system would have cost.
Got it.
I
Go ahead.
Well, I'd add, when we're pricing projects for owners, developers, those decisions have always been out there. Do we make the investment now on geothermal or solar or alternative energy, and look at that 25-year payoff? And that's the first thing that gets trimmed. It's the cash we need right now to get the thing off the ground. So another thing that just kind of breaks that link to the construction side of things.
Gotcha.
Yeah, from our standpoint, I don't know if it's the act or just consumers getting wise. We see a lot of solar, in fact, in our lower price points. And I think it's an educational moment, but more importantly, quite frankly, and I say this, it's railroads, utility companies, and God in that order. And, with the ability of these natural disasters and these rates that are just, I hate to say unregulated, but they're unregulated. The utility companies have a national disaster, the rates get jumped up. So I think it's at that tipping point for consumers. They're starting to realize that investment with some of the tax credits that are available, heat pumps, for example, the solar, some of these consumer-based ones that they can appreciate an immediate tax rebate, if you will, but also recognizing that in the life cycle of 5 to 7 years, in the uncertainty of these rates that are just going crazy, they are taking advantage, just like Kelly said, foreshadowing what's to come. People are a little bit nervous about those kinds of things where there's a monopoly, so to speak. And quite frankly, they should be.
If developers find it difficult to finance construction projects, that can produce an insufficient demand for construction services. And as we talked about with rising interest rates and the high cost of capital resulting in lower returns, banks could be less willing to lend to real estate development. Landowners may scrutinize proposals more aggressively. Kelly and Chad, I pose this to you. What's the trickle-down impact to construction firms dependent on commercial real estate?
I mean, it's real. What's going on right now is by design. You can blame Powell or whoever you want to blame. Jobs are being lost at an exponential rate, and we're just now starting to see that. Subs are hungry. I'm bidding out a couple of infrastructure jobs, and I've never seen in my 25 years of doing land development, contractors openly eager to negotiate and work angles to try to land deals. That's apparent. And right now in the residential world, because it's a little quicker cycle than the commercial, we're seeing subs nervous.
I'd add that, with creative financing, trying to navigate through the higher interest rates, it helps to be cash heavy, obviously, at any point, but especially right now. Luckily, we're fortunate enough to be in that position, and we're finding ourselves investing more in projects, a lot more than we ever have in the past. It creates that. I mean, everyone's trying to make that relationship and work together to I guess progress the project forward, and we see a lot more of that, as Chad just said, to negotiate a deal as opposed to just bidding something out. And so investing in a project creates, I guess, some skin in the game for a contractor. And I'd also add, we're seeing people moving into different markets more than we have. It seems like in the corridor, Iowa City, knowledge-based economy down there, especially, people kind of tend to stick around that same radius, and we're seeing people move over to Des Moines and the Quad Cities. So we're traveling farther outside of our usual region to keep up with that as well. So,
I'm not familiar with that term, cash heavy. I don't know what that means.
Equity's expensive. We know that.
Yeah.
So according to the latest economic forecast by the Associated Builders and Contractors, third quarter costs were up sharply, due to wage hikes, supply chain issues, materials inflation, which can cut into contractors' profits, as we've kind of talked about. According to the poll, 43% of construction companies expected their profit margins to stay the same in a year, while 23% answered they expected profits will be slightly lower. Only 5% of companies said that they expected substantially higher profits. Kelly, what's the outlook for your business? And what are Iowa contractors' expectations for sales, profit margins, and staffing levels going forward?
We are positioned really well at the moment. We've got more pricing out or projects in the bid hopper than we ever have, honestly. It's our gauge of what's coming is to look at how busy the architects are. So every architect we work with right now is just absolutely slammed and missing deadlines left and right. So when those guys slow down, we know that a lull is coming in 6 months or so. But right now, that's not on the horizon, at least for us. As it relates to margins, that Chad's comment a second ago. I don't agree with that. We are not raking it in hand over fist. I haven't seen much difference in our margins. If anything, they've gone down just a little bit, and we try to make up for it in volume. Our challenge is going to continue to be staffing. It is harder and harder to find people, skilled tradesmen, to be out in the field and build these things, and that's just only going to get harder and harder. I'm sure we'll talk about that more as the session goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. But since you mentioned architects, Steve, is he right?
Oh yeah, I mean we're still busy, we're still pushing, but like the cost of staffing is going up dramatically. You try hiring somebody, their expectations, right out of school are, yeah, it makes me blush because it's like, gosh, when I was out of school, I made quarter of that. But yeah, it's crazy. And everybody to hold on to your staff, it's you got to be creative, not just with money, but you got to make it a place they don't want to leave. But yeah, we're varied architecturally. We do work for ourselves. We do work for other developers and other clients all over the Midwest, and we're having a hard time keeping up.
The ABC forecast also noted a disparity between demands for construction companies who specialize in infrastructure and manufacturing projects and those who depend on sectors such as office and retail, which we've talked a little bit about. Obviously, with the former expected to keep busy with the influx of federal infrastructure spending, while the latter is likely to experience a slowdown in work. I'm just going to throw this to the group. With the Infrastructure Investment in Jobs Act, how has the influx of federal infrastructure spending impacted construction and development in Iowa? How is that impacting your business and the pace development planning of projects?
Doesn't impact me at all. The federal infrastructure, the only way the feds have influenced me is, like I said, the housing grants, where they disseminate money down to the state and it's housing, but the infrastructure doesn't help me at all. I don't do anything in that realm.
Same here, and I couldn't even name something locally that's been impacted. Honestly, it doesn't cross my daily path of business.
Chad, what about with your business? No.
No, maybe some of the airports I fly in and out of will be improved. I don't know. I'm hoping.
Well, I mean, they're working right now on the Eastern Iowa Airport.
Yeah.
I guess
Tom, I'd say we're actually doing that project, the phase 4 expansion of that.
Of course you are.
That's been in the works for years. I mean, this is phase 4 out of how many years has work been going on that. So I don't know if they got money, I guess, as a result of some of these incentives that have been put in place in the last couple of years. I don't believe so. But like I said, that it's not affected us. We're not seeing that, and not dependent on continuing with that project or starting it, I guess, in the first place.
Yeah. Well, so I guess what role does local infrastructure transportation play in your development planning?
I mean, I think from a standpoint of opening up areas, like if you think about out by the Prairie School District, they've been lacking lift stations and sewerability and things like that. So being that that's one of the most desirable school systems that we have in this area, if there was monies being spent towards that or strategic planning of other areas of the city, Obviously, that opens up hundreds of acres of farm ground that could be then developed. But again, right now is not a lot of subdivision work going on just because of the interest rates. I mean, until these interest rates settle down, it's hard to make the deals work.
Got it. To circle back to something that was mentioned earlier, the difficulty in finding labor and finding workers and holding on to them. So another poll from the ABC showed that 66% of contractors said that the shortage of skilled labor was their top challenge in 2023. And that there were more than 300,000 construction jobs open in 2023. A big chunk of the large baby boomer population will retire soon, meaning the next construction workforce will need lots of training. And the scarcity and demand for skilled workers has driven rapid wage growth, while the pay in sectors like retail and hospitality has been catching up, making those skilled trade positions especially hard to fill. Kelly, what has that meant for your business and efforts to attract and train new workers?
Well, so I agree with that. The boomers retiring. We've got from our field supervision level, we've got 2/3 of our guys that have been with us 25 or been in the industry at least 25 years plus. Retirement for those guys is on the horizon very quickly. The next group of those field leaders, there's a big age gap. We're seeing, when I started in this business 23 years ago, whatever it's been, I saw a lot more people enter the trades from an apprenticeship standpoint, get experience in the field, and that has switched now to most people going to college and coming out and going into the trades. We're doing everything we can from an industry in Iowa. Master Builders of Iowa has made a really good push to, I guess, educate students and families. There's a stigma around working in the trades in the field that, it's blue collar, but educating folks that, you can make a pretty good living being in the field and have a pretty good work environment and not just stuck behind a desk. So we have to go younger and younger, it seems, because when a kid gets to be a freshman in high school, they've already been told for the last 5 years that they're going to college. So, it's a hard hurdle to overcome. We're working a lot with like Kirkwood Community College here. Those colleges are actually starting programs like a work education program. We're chipping in for tuition. We are paying higher than we ever have in the past. We're trying to incentivize people with more culture related items. I mean, we're an employee owned company. We've recently expanded those opportunities to be an employee owner to our field staff. That wasn't something previous to the pandemic that we were doing. So, I mean, it's a challenge, and I think it's going to continue. People are going to continue to try to get creative to attract, hire, but most importantly, retain the people we already have.
Can you elaborate on some of those incentives that you've been offering to try and retain people? What those incentives are?
So, a lot of little things that, in aggregate add up to a lot. We started giving clothing allowances to our guys in the field. We've never done that before. I mentioned the employee ownership, the opportunity to buy stock in our company that we've never done before. Tuition assistance, we've done that in the past, but it's not something we advertised. We're openly advertising that now. We're offering higher and higher sign-on bonuses, referral bonuses. We try to do a lot of culture related activities. Next Friday, I've got an event for our entire field staff to go have a lunch, take the afternoon off, do a fun activity, just kind of build more of that family environment and, create some loyalty.
Yeah, Tom, if I would,
Yeah.
Same thing over here. We went to a 4-day work week. Pay the people, if they work 4 nines, we're paying them 40. We put a gym in, the new office space, just little things you wouldn't think matter. Having that flexibility, as Kelly mentions, with your work day, everybody, we've all worked for a tyrant before and put in 150 hours a week. And I missed out on my kids' entire life. Honestly, they're not that's gone. You know, my generation was told you had no choice but to go to college. And I think there was a bad stigma around the trades. And you mentioned, Kelly, that gap in there. I'm optimistic just through my affiliation with the Home Builders Association, through Kirkwood and some of these others in the school programs. I'm very optimistic that they're starting to recognize, look, their buds are going to be sitting in their mom's basement playing video games after college with a degree they can't use, and they're out starting their own business and turning out, or being six-figure salaries as an electrician, plumber, etc. So I think the stigma is getting squashed, and that's some optimism. But you still have, since COVID, you know, the 4 million plus legal immigrants a year not able to come to work. That's going to take its toll. You know, we see that out in Montana heavily, as well as, you know, this group of, I guess, 25 to 40-year-old men just sitting it out. I don't even know what they're doing. My mom wouldn't let me move home after I was 18.
Yeah.
Well, and there is that group of people out there, and I don't know if it's specific to an age group, that just don't want to work. They can get by with what they're doing, or work part-time for a little bit and do something, and then spend their money, then do it again. There's a group that really has no interest in putting in a good career or working hard.
You know, I'd add also, you know, it's easier and easier to get a job with 300,000 job openings last year. I think you mentioned, Tom. You know, we're based in Cedar Rapids. We do a lot of work in Iowa City. It is, if we tell a guy that lives in Cedar Rapids, hey, for the next 9 months, you're going to Iowa City. That may not seem like a lot. I mean, it's 25 minutes to get down there, but they can easily go down the street and get another job and not have to drive that 25 minutes. So we've started paying mileage. We used to offer that, but it was after a longer period, more miles, and now we've reduced that a lot. And then you mentioned 4-day work week, Chad. You know, for our tradespeople, we have never ever considered having or allowing flexible schedules and part-time. And now we're advertising that. I mean, if someone can come to work for us and they can work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, as long as we can count on that, that's fantastic. It's the sporadic thing that we can't deal with. If, you know, they're here every other Tuesday and maybe the next Wednesday, like, we can't plan on that. But if we know guys are going to be on the site Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we can plan our construction schedules around that. So just getting creative.
Another question from the audience. What are your thoughts on aligning immigration policies with workforce needs to assist with addressing labor shortages?
Duh. That's the no-brainer. It's like, come on. If there's one item that the two sides can agree on, it should be that, right?
So I guess, can you talk about what maybe the industry is doing, or maybe what your businesses are doing to, I guess, reach out to labor markets that I guess maybe traditionally you haven't reached out to before, or worker groups that maybe traditionally have been ignored?
Okay. I mean, Kirkwood's doing an exceptional job. They've got various programs where they're learning and earning at the same time with immigrants and of various backgrounds, and, you know, and even with the language barrier, I think it's, I don't even know how to say this politely. Americans are lazy, it seems, right? And I'm just going to say that. So, you know, you have the programs like Kirkwood has, and I think a lot of people don't recognize and realize some of those programs. I'm sure Kelly's very well versed in them because they do pump out a lot of workers. You know, the trucking industry, for example, takes heavily advantage of doing this similar thing. I know CRT has their training program. I think you're going to see an evolution where, I don't know, larger companies like Kelly's, you know, maybe that's what they'll have to resort to, is actually, you know, grooming it, for lack of a better term, employees to meet their needs.
Yeah, you know, our standards, I guess, have decreased in the existing knowledge of people when they come on board. I mean, if someone has the drive and the work ethic and, you know, reliable transportation, shows up on time, we can train them, and we'll make that investment to do so. You know, 5 years ago, that wouldn't have been something we would have considered. You know, we're going into markets. heavy in manufacturing or factories. And I'll use West Liberty, Iowa, as an example. I mean, they've got the Tyson turkey processing facility over there. I mean, we're advertising in that town to attract workers. It's heavy Hispanic there. We are trying to get into that population. We're trying to attract field leaders who are bilingual, who can break that barrier between the language barrier, paying a premium for it. So I was at a conference in Minneapolis a couple weeks ago, and obviously a lot bigger market. I know Anderson Windows, they use as an example. They have recently put in prayer rooms and feet washing stations in their facilities to attract the Muslim population that may be able to come and work for them. So a lot of people are getting creative.
And I have a hard time speaking to this because I'm not always politically correct filtered. But 10 years ago on site, you're going to construction sites and you're insulted when you had, the Spanish speaking crews doing your roofing or drywall or stuff like that. And there was a pride with the unions in town, the drywallers saying, no, you can't use those guys, you got to use us. And there was almost a competition or a backlash when you had the Spanish speaking crews on site. Now there's just frankly not enough people that want to work. That you go to my construction sites right now, literally half the people are Honduran or wherever, and it's great. I appreciate that, and I love that you got these other people that want to work when frankly, like Chad said, when the American guys just are sitting at home and don't want to work or are just bitching about it, and it's like, well, if they want to work and they want to get the work done, we're going to invite them on and we're going to try figuring out ways to support that. And like, I'm not bilingual, I speak French, but there's not many French people here doing drywall. But it's hard. You do have a communication gap, and it's a struggle at times because you're trying to explain. But if you've got somebody that's bilingual that can coordinate the crews, that would be huge. And I welcome those crews now because they're the ones that are doing the work. They're cranking it out, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
So what would be, I guess, the most helpful for you, either at the state or federal level, to, I guess, to make it easier to, I guess, transition, that those workers or that labor force, into your workforce and make it easier maybe to, to bring more of those, I guess, workers on board to fill, labor gaps that you have?
Well, purely, I mean, like you've already discussed programs or whatever, but making the people that are immigrating into this country, rather than just being kind of, sitting there not able to do anything and just being leeches on society, not that immigrants are, that other people aren't too, but being effective contributors to the workforce and earning their way, finding programs to get them able to do that, whether it's through communication, through skills, or through just legally allowing it, rather than forcing them to sneak around and sneak on sites and do work that way. If there's a way to do that and get the work done, that's great. And it's not as important right now, but like you've mentioned, when the boomers start retiring, that's going to hurt worse. I mean, I have construction guys on staff too, and they're all old. I mean, I'm old. We're all at the age of retiring. I'm going to lose my entire staff, and that's fine because I'm going to retire too, hopefully at the same time. But there's going to be a hole left there that, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be gone that aren't going to be replaced, that we need to figure out a way to replace them.
This problem's not going away. We're going to be dealing with this. I'm 42. I'm, probably 25 years left in this, and it will continue the rest of my career, guaranteed. I'm hearing this middle 2050s until this starts to turn around. And that's when the boomers are gone. So it's going to be upside down until then. I certainly don't want to start a political debate as much as Chad may want to, but
Boy does.
I don't think we're ever going to agree both sides on an immigration policy that will be any kind of helpful. I could sit here and say it needs to be regulated, obviously, but just to say close the border, build a wall, that's not helpful. People are still going to come here. They're going to sneak on job sites. They're going to work. They're going to get paid cash under the table, and the government's not going to collect any taxes. Meanwhile, the industry will benefit, but our society won't. So, I think people just coming together and realizing the problem, talking to the people like us, they're on the ground and seeing these things firsthand. That's the first step, right? And just stop being so divisive and just us versus them and so on. So I don't see us getting there, but that's what I'd like.
So lawmakers earlier this year passed a new law easing child labor restrictions, opening up opportunities for high school students to work in occupations previously deemed hazardous, including roofing, construction, demolition, so long as they're part of a state-approved training program. Is that an answer? I guess, how do you feel about that legislation?
Not yet, it's not. I don't know that there's a lot of programs or things that these kids know about. We use high school kids to help just clean up job sites, do stuff like that. I live out in the country near small towns where you get farm kids that want to work. So we'll use them for hauling crap out of the buildings and all that now, just as a infill or short hours. But for them to take their time during high school to go to some state approved training agency to legally be able to work on job sites like that, I think it's a pretty tall ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you got the same thing Kelly was talking about, their availability. You got to rely on them for certain times during days. And if it's from, 3:30 to 5 on, 4 nights a week, that's not going to help that much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another question we got from the audience, what role do you see zoning and land use policies legislation playing in shaping the development landscape?
It's constant change, right? That's a tough question. A lot of cities and communities have gone through this repetitively. Marion's going through a comprehensive plan revamp right now. They just passed a moratorium, and I understand and get it. I think, even Cedar Rapids, when they went to the form-based, I think you're going to have it, and I think the intent is good. It's trying to step it up, bring a higher level of quality, but also you're seeing an evolution, like Steve said. We don't do office. I don't do office. I'm not trying to even chase an office. The city's policies change so frequent. And quite frankly, if I was a business owner, you can hop around from city to city every 5 to 10 years and chase the incentives, right? It's dangerous for a developer or a real estate professional to own property when that's kind of your result that you could always experience. I think you got to be careful. That's one of those fine lines. You have seen cities make themselves their standards such that not a lot happens because of it. You also have to recognize locally, and hopefully this doesn't offend any of the cities, but I'm often asked, why can't you do that project in my community? Well, because in the other community, the incentives, I know what they are. It's like a menu at a restaurant. It's very clear to me. It's easy. If I'm doing this, I know I can expect this. Also have rent rates that are X% higher there. The cost of the project's the same, 10 miles apart. So I think what you have is you have these governments that should understand that. That's very simple. I think any kindergartner could understand the economics behind that. But you still just have these big differences, and which cities are getting after it because those cities see a lot more opportunities, a lot more activity, etc. So this is just one more piece in that puzzle of what makes it painful for Steve, where he knows it's easy. You heard him when he started. There's communities he knows what he can expect without a lot of headache and a lot of hurdles and delays. Because quite frankly, when we're playing with real estate, time is money. But more importantly, we only have so much due diligence. So when they drag that out for a year, that doesn't work. These sellers don't say, hey, yeah, just take my property off the market for a year while you go argue.
Comprehensive plans and zonings are frankly, kind of cute to me. It's a city or a consultant that's dictating that, okay, this block is going to be this, but yet they're not buying anything in that block. They're not getting a loan for it. They're not developing it or planning on owning it. And so they create this canvas and say, you can do this here, you can do this here, you can do this here. And then you get somebody like me or Chad or somebody coming in and say, no, I'm going to do this here. And so then I have to basically just go against a comprehensive plan or rezone it or do whatever to do what I think makes sense there. Now I'm the one putting the money into it, and I'm the one that is at risk. The city's not. So to have a comprehensive plan that, especially the stagnant ones that they never look at, are just dumb. The ones that they actively push or try to find somebody or market or do something to incentivize what their plan is, that's fine. But a lot of these cities will just say, this block is going to be housing, and fine, I just won't do anything there, type of thing.
The market's going to dictate it. I mean, the market's going to dictate it at the end of the day.
A follow-up question we have from the audience: with the change in the recruitment landscape and the new communities of workers you're bringing in, do you see any similarities or differences in interest to organizing to join or form a labor union?
Steve, go ahead. I'm not touching that one.
No. I mean, I honestly, whether it's union or not union, the safety and education requirements and the union people argue differently. They're so similar. You can't have a non-union shop that the people aren't trained or aren't doing a good job and aren't being safe on site regardless. And even the guys that are signatory to the union type contractors some of them are just frankly still trying to find a way to use other contractors that have the availability or the ability to get the job done just because we need them to do the job. So I don't know that the unions, and frankly, I don't know that there's a lot of people or any people sitting on the bench of the unions that they have more people available to do the work. I use union contractors, I use non-union contractors, and I don't know that I could be on site and point the difference out to them without starting an argument on site and getting them all flowed up. So
go at 3:30 in the afternoon, you'll know which ones are there.
So, as I mentioned earlier, the limited availability of various building products due to lack of manufacturing capacity to keep up with demand is, also contributing to the rising cost of construction, delaying deliveries to contractors. The pandemic caused supply chain disruptions, backlogs for construction business worldwide. Lead times increased sharply. Rising demand has strained many companies struggling to keep up. Kelly, I'm interested, what are developers and contractors doing to create workarounds, and what is your company doing?
Well, having strategic partnerships, negotiating projects with owners on a long-term basis. I mean, we work with, repeat clients are our bread and butter, and that plays in really well for a workaround for all these issues. So, a lot of times cost is less of a factor than schedule. So if we can promise to deliver through those partnerships that we're creating, promise to deliver faster, but maybe at a premium, just depending on the item, that has been well received. We are pre-ordering stuff. When we met last week, I think I mentioned that we just spent $9 million on generators, and they're not going to be here for 2 years. But they're for data centers, and we know we're going to build them. That demand is not going away. So, again, cash is king there. You can't do that when you're paying carrying costs there. But those types of things for us, that's making a big difference.
And Chad, what about you? How is your company being impacted by supply chain issues, and how has it tried to deal with that?
Well, like Kelly mentioned, it's those relationships with those vendors and those contractors that are critical. Forecasting out, we adhere to a budget, right? We know we got an X number of units need to be put into service, meaning we got so many apartments, so many houses, specifically so many lots, etc. So working with those contractors, but we're changing up. We're starting deals like the cabinets. We're dealing our own cabinets, not just for the markup, because the lead time was so ridiculous, and we're replicating. So we're more not like a track builder, but we're saying, hey, we're going to stockpile these 30 types of cabinets for this type of floor plan, and trying to do things like that where we've got warehouse space now. And like Kelly says, we're spending the money in anticipation and planning better. you're literally communicating more than you ever have with those lead times. For example, the garage doors, they were like 26 weeks, and electric, I'm not sure what's going on with electric. I missed a whole year in Montana waiting on pedestals. And the answer is, okay, whatever. And there's agreements with the city. There's franchise agreements where they have deliveries, but it's just lack of accountability across the board. So we're being nimble and we're being smarter about it. And I think it takes a lot of communication. Quite frankly, that's really the difference, is you've got to communicate and you've got to know what those expectations are. And they seem to be changing constantly. So education, communication.
Yeah, like they said, pre-ordering whatever you can. I've started projects and I've ordered for projects that I hadn't even designed yet. I ordered heat pumps from a geothermal system on the Iowa building when we started Skogman. That was a year in advance. Got those coming. Skogman building, when we built those out for 44 apartments, we couldn't get meter stacked. So we said, no, screw it. We have one electrical service and electric is included in the rent now. We don't have separate meters there, and we have to offer electricity free to the tenants. Granted, we can track that a little bit, but not per tenant. And so we just weren't capable of doing that. I've got another project. When I bought the guarantee building, I contemplated taking the main disconnect electrical out of the existing guarantee building to put over to Iowa, just because I couldn't get it. And so I was going to salvage an existing electrical service to put in a new project so that that one could go, so I could start this next one when I get it done. It's just, it's stupid, but it's stuff you got to do. It costs you money. But if you wait another 18 months longer and you can't open a building, that costs you more money. So it's just crazy.
We're trying to get creative on electrical components specifically. A lot of utility providers, well, some of them may have a warehouse full of transformers and some may have none in stock. There are companies that refurbish transformers, but utility companies don't want to use those. So we're trying to make deals, I guess, with those companies to, I guess, for us to take on a little more risk, which we transfer to an owner. As Steve said, time is money. If we can take a little bit of a risk on a $30,000 component versus waiting 6 more months for that component, I mean, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Also being creative with the engineering consultants. Most engineers will over design. Electrical is a great example of that. So there'll be a 2,500 amp service, and maybe that really needs to be a 2,000 amp service. And utility companies don't like to double up their services to one facility, but if we can provide 2,000 amp services versus one 2,000, that reduces lead time, generates more profit for those guys. So, just having those conversations and trying to just think creatively that we've never had to do is yielding some results. I won't say it's been extremely effective, but it's helping.
So how does the construction industry solve the supply-demand imbalances and logistical bottlenecks that we're seeing?
If I knew that, I would not be here today.
And it's random. I mean, there was, sometimes it's drywall mud, sometimes it's electrical, sometimes it's, something else. You never know. And it's almost, Chad alluded to this a little bit, it's almost like people are using it as an excuse to charge more or work, slower in their plants, make more money or whatever it is. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing we talked about with chips. We couldn't get chips, so you couldn't get devices. Now, supposedly there's chip plants being built in the United States, but we haven't seen those yet. I would hope that the industry would fix itself. Like if Square D can't keep up, maybe they get a competitor coming in building their stuff. That's what we hope for in America, but haven't seen it yet. And maybe it's just because they have the capacity, but they're just using it as an excuse. I don't know.
It's policy. Some of it's policy. Like I said, railroads, utilities, God, there's a monopoly. Let's just be honest. You don't get to choose 3 different providers. They've got specifications. It's almost like it's set up for this. It's a phenomenon. The electric blows my mind. Of all of them, it's the electrics, and you don't have answers. Good luck. I mean, we've tried everything. Can we find a different spec that works? It's frustrating, as you can sense. And it's random. That's the thing. It's so random. Today it's one way. Next week, like Steve said, it's a different component. I'm really blown away as an engineer, and as you know, I was really optimistic that the good old boy club of construction would start embracing different materials, different practices during this, and we didn't. You know what I mean? And not to get off record, but we're still using copper water services. Guys, come on. It's $2,000 cost to a house versus a $4 plastic service, which in my opinion, as an engineer, is a superior product from all kinds of levels. Certainly the one that's not getting crinked every time I try to roll that coil out. It blows my mind. Now you're talking egos at a local level because that's a local standard. So I think, again, policies across the board, the good old boys club, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of those that are roadblocks to some of this happening, change, if you will.
Mm-hmm. A new question we have from the audience, and this kind of leads me into my next question. How can local voices be incorporated into development projects?
I mean, from my standpoint, I think anybody will tell you, I don't start a project, especially a master plan neighborhood, without including stakeholders, meaning my neighbors, the city officials, etc. I think that should be standard practice. Now, I'm not saying placate to the people that aren't putting skin in the game, but it's certainly a good faith effort that you're listening and maybe always come up with something that's a concern that you didn't think about. If that's what that question was asking, I think that's just a good practice. We've got one down in the Ellis corridor right now that's gone on a year where literally we had the smiley faces and the frowns, and we started with scaling and architectural flavor, if you will. I just think that including your neighbor and being a good neighbor is good for development.
Well, and local voices are driving markets. I mean, I'm a downtown guy. I always plan on owning buildings downtown because one next to the other helps the other. And if I get another next to it and I fix that up, then they're all worth more. And I always intended on doing commercial and office buildings. And now all of a sudden I accidentally own 300 apartments down here. I didn't plan on it, never planned on multifamily. I didn't want to get the 2 a.m. calls, my toilet's, clogged or whatever. I planned on 80,000 square foot tenants that never call. And that was my master plan. But people wanted apartments, they wanted multifamily, they wanted it down here. And I heard that, and I've been doing it. And it's a self-preservation technique now, but up until this point, I didn't know there was an interest and people wanted to live downtown. I work down here, and everybody thinks I live down here. I don't, but a lot of people want to.
So what can Iowans do to move progress forward on this issue? I guess where is the construction industry in Iowa trying to get to, and what are going to be the resources needed to get there?
It's not a specific answer, but there's always blips in the market, and it always balances out. It always corrects. Sometimes it overcorrects. And it will correct a lot slower than it got off track, unfortunately. So, we're talking about inflation being record high, and it's coming down, but interest rates are going up still. So, that's happened over the course of a couple of years. And, Steve said 3 years until they start coming down. I mean, who knows?
That's optimistic.
That's optimistic. Right. This may be the new norm. It may never come down. Things will balance out. And I mean, working with these two guys, they figure out what the demand is, what the system needs, and those guys will tailor their business to it. I mean, that's just a given. That's capitalism. That's the free market. So, that's going to continue to happen. And, we're trying to plan as much as we can with, I guess the hardest time in my career of being able to plan. So it's just, we're along for the ride and trying to adapt.
I think one thing that'll help us as the Midwest is, I say this as a compliment, is the Midwest is boring. And we don't have the economically boring, more so than just, socially, I guess. We don't have the severe peaks and the severe valleys that you have out on the coasts. We're protected a little bit from the recessions. And so I think that's going to help us retain people and maybe gain people, as people realize that, hey, these coasts aren't what they should be. So I don't know.
All right.
Yep. I would agree with that. The migration will help us. I think those bigger cities, they're going to be the ones that are going to have, I guess the Home Builders Association was pressing Powell lately and talking about the hard crash, or the hard landing. we've always had, and it's crazy how locally, even through the floods, through everything else, there's always been that saving grace where things have kept on keeping on. And like you said, Kelly, we adapt and adjust to it. But I feel like we're a little bit safer than most of those, like Steve said.
Sounds good. Well, that's our time. Thank you, everyone, for attending this track, Keeping Construction. The next session in the economic development track is the under-maintained building, which begins at 1:20. I want to thank our panelists, Steve Emerson, Chad Pelly, Kelly Edmonds, and again, thank you to our audience for your questions and your interest, and to our Iowa Ideas sponsor, ITC Midwest. Like I said, next session coming up at 1:20, the under-maintained building. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it.